Hey, hey, welcome to Black Girl, Brown Girl, Squirrel, your go-to spot for women of color that are neurodivergent. We're your hosts, Shy and Alexis, two neurodivergent sister friends just trying to figure it all out.
So grab your favorite snack, sit back, relax, and let's squirrel together.
We want to take a moment to acknowledge there are a variety of people who could describe themselves as neurodivergent, and this can include a diverse list of conditions, disorders, etc.
And while our experiences may specifically relate to autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, we hope that all our listeners can feel welcome and relate to the shared experience of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, because this is our safe space.
Hey, Squirrel.
Hey, friend. How you doing?
I'm good. I don't know if Lex will ever get used to being called Squirrel, but we're squirrels.
Probably
okay.
Not, and I'll never get used to her laughing at me for no reason. But we here, ain't we?
And that always makes me laugh even more because I was like, no, I think you're funny sometimes, even when you think you're being dead serious. You're funny.
Being myself.
You're just being yourself. And I love you for that, friend. Okay, so we're back for the second part about challenges to being diagnosed. We talked previously from a medical standpoint and some highlights there. Now we want to get into from a societal standpoint. Let me preface this by saying that I know to an extent we're preaching to the choir, but we also have listeners. We have listeners that are men and women. First of all, men who are not women, of course. And then also we also have women that are listening to us that are not technically part of our community as far as being Black, Brown, or Asian or being part of the diaspora. And so oftentimes they question, like I mentioned in our previous episode, about why do we have a specific podcast solely for those of us that are women of color and neurodivergent. And so this episode will specifically address some of that, and also to help those of us in the community further understand some of the challenges that we can prepare ourselves to experience so that we can become better health advocates for ourselves. And this is true in general, but especially when it comes to our mental health and neurodivergence, that we can be advocates for ourselves and not just have what we're experiencing pushed to the side. So with that said, I guess we can just go on and dive in. Which one of these you want to take, Lex?
We kind of mentioned in the previous episode that the fact that the diagnostic criteria for many of the conditions that fall under neurodivergence, all of the research for it, all of the information available, all of the trials and everything were mostly done on young white boys, which means that the criteria is not really taking into account any differences with gender or culture associated with race.
Mm-hmm.
So when the information is only kind of being spoken about from one point of view, it kind of leaves everybody else out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you end up in situations where, like we mentioned before with a friend of ours who had her daughter assessed, that when she first went to ask, can I have my child assessed? It was like, I don't think she is. I'm not really sure what they based that off of, but it could just be just looking at her and being like, well, she doesn't look like most autistic children that I see. I'm like, well, the ones that you've seen that have a diagnosis were probably young white boys.
Yep.
And leaving us out.
Yes. And also, too, she is highly intelligent for her age. So we'll get into that, too, because that's another.
Yeah, so was I, Shy.
Yeah, we all were.
I was looking at that child like, ooh, that's me. Oh, if that's what that looked like, how did I make it this far? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, since that's since we talked about that, let's talk about that as one of the first things. Girls in particular. So we're starting with girls because, growing into womanhood, many of us when we were younger were probably told we were gifted. We probably excelled in a particular academic area. Mine was reading, writing, language arts. Second to that was probably history, and way down the list was math. And I was told that I was gifted. I always tested well in the areas that I was strongest in. And my mother taught me to read at a young age. I was reading by age of 2. The reality is that I could hyper focus on subjects that I really, really liked. So because of that, I excelled in those subjects. That did not make me quote unquote gifted. But I'll come back to that because I did ask a teacher a question about gifted. So I'm making a note about that. What about you, Lex?
Yeah, so I also was called gifted. I also was reading at 2 years old. Going into pre-K and going into kindergarten, I distinctly remember, and I have thoughts about this anyway. We get to kindergarten and we're like, we're going to learn how to read. And I raised my hand and I said, I already know how to read. And that lady said, no, you don't. What you say that for? Why you say no, I don't? What about me, this child you've never met before, just seemed like she's lying. She doesn't know how to read. That's interesting. I then proceeded to grab a book and just start reading, which is wild.
Boom. I've done that too. I have done that too as a child. Yes.
And then they were like, oh, you do know how to read. I'm like, yes, I told you I know how to read already. And then they had me helping to teach other kids when they was doing assessments because I'm bored because I'm in kindergarten and kindergarten work ain't but so much of stuff. And my mom had literally taught me all of this at home because at some point in time she was considering becoming a teacher. So she was doing all kinds of stuff at home. So
yeah, I did that as a kid too. And I used to get challenged a lot. Like not just I couldn't read. I still remember the first word they taught us in kindergarten, cooperation. Wasn't hard for me to learn how to read it, spell it, and understand the meaning. But as I got older, especially when I got into like 2nd, 3rd grade, you can't read that level of book. Why? Because it's a 10th grade book? Yes, I can. And I would sit down and read it. And if there were words I didn't understand, don't worry about it because I'm going to get the dictionary. I'm going to get the encyclopedia. I was the kid that read everything because back then, you read cereal boxes when you sat down and eat breakfast. I know all the ingredients that are in Frosted Flakes and Lucky Charms. You read the cereal boxes, those are the things that we did. So I read some of everything, including encyclopedias, including dictionaries, forwards and backwards. And I thought I was a weird child because I enjoyed reading those things. And I guess to an extent I was, because most people don't enjoy reading a dictionary or an encyclopedia. But on the other hand, that was calming and relaxing for me. That was a sensory thing, a calming and relaxing thing for me. But yeah, we often get titled gifted. So I actually asked a teacher, not my husband, but a gifted teacher. I said, how do you know a child is gifted versus neurodivergent? Now, let me preface this by saying, I first asked the guidance counselors of the elementary school. The people that are supposed to work with the kids and test them and do all those things. And that's how they come up with the individual educational plans, the IEPs and RTIs and all that stuff that they throw out there. They looked at me like I had talked to them in a foreign language. I said, how do you diagnose, or not diagnose, but how do you know that a child is gifted versus being neurodivergent? And he literally, there's 2 of them now, but one of them literally looked at me in the face and said, what do you mean by neurodivergent?
Oh no. I didn't know you was going to say that. I was not prepared for that to be the answer. They've not heard that term at all. Did they just need some clarification on like what type? I'm trying to be generous here. Okay.
I couldn't be generous at that time. I just looked at him like, you have got to be kidding me. And I just said, neurodivergent. Now, it's a good thing I'm on medication because that's when my rage would have kicked in. The one I said sends me out to Pluto. That's when that would have kicked in. And it's also a good thing that I had to be a professional in that environment. So I just simply said neurodivergent, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, just to name 2 of the most primary ones. Like, And I turned around and walked away. So then I went to the gifted teacher and I said, whose classroom, by the way, was set up so cozy and so warm and so comforting with dimmed lights. It was like every neurodivergent's almost dream. Might have been a little bit of an overload with some of the things in the room, but other than that, it was like, woosah. And I said, may I ask you, what determines that a child is gifted versus being neurodivergent? And she said that there is a series of tests and it's got like 7 different types of criteria, and they have to score a certain level on those criteria to determine that this child is basically at an exceptional level for their grade level. So basically, if you're in 3rd grade and let's say you're testing at like a 7th grade level in every aspect, you're probably going to be considered gifted. Not just testing at that in one particular subject, but across all subjects, amongst other things, will determine if you're gifted. So standardized tests are still at play. I remember as a kid, we had a lot of standardized tests, and I would always ace the ones that were English, language arts, and not do so well in math. How I was still considered gifted, I guess they've advanced the tests. But
I do remember when I was in school taking a test that landed me in the gifted program, which essentially was just one day every week or every 2 weeks. I went to a class and I actually had to take a bus from the middle school I went to a different middle school because the gifted program teacher was like the one for the county.
wow.
So all the kids in the county who would fall into the gifted program would bus to this location at this school if they didn't already go to this school, and you're being gifted for the day. And then when it was over, you take a bus back to your original school.
And
I do remember taking a test for this.
Wow, interesting.
And I do remember some of the kids in that class I felt a little bit more on the same page with, but some of them not. I would like to argue that I think it could be possible that you can be both. Like you can be with what lands you in gifted and also be neurodivergent. There was another boy in that class who, in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that boy was autistic. And I think he probably had a diagnosis because he was white. He was like the only white boy I really saw, because when I went to middle school, it was like in a very black county. There'd be like one white person per grade, right? So he was like the only one. But even back then, I was like, he's a little different from these other ones, but in a way that I relate to and I like it. I like this white man. I like this white boy. This is cool. But I think in my mind, I'm like, you can be both. So I don't think there's much of an issue. I think back and there's probably some benefits I got from it. And I do think that what was happening is teachers could probably look at me and tell like something's different about this kid. And she's also smart. So why not try to get her something else where she might be able to be around some other kids who might be kind of similar to her in that way.
And I think sometimes, and I do agree, let me put that out there. I do agree that you can be both. I'm just saying that generally speaking, they're going to categorize you as one way because they're not thinking the other way. So they're going to categorize you as gifted, not thinking that some of your social interaction challenges might be because you might also be neurodivergent. They're thinking, oh, well, they're probably picking on you, or you're probably not as socially adept as they say, as you could be because you just love to read, or you just love to sit and do math, or you love science. And it's like, no, I literally am not comfortable peopling and talking to people. For me, it wasn't so much that I was a people pleaser. It wasn't that I didn't want to be around people. I didn't know how to be friends with people without trying to please them, which led to some other traumas that I won't speak about. And so I was also hypersensitive, which is another sign of neurodivergence. Like literally, I can remember as a kid watching TV, and if an animal died on the screen, I bawled my eyes out. We used to have Hallmark commercials that would come on TV. You guys do remember Hallmark. They're the greeting cards. Yeah. They used to do commercials all the time on TV, and I would cry on the Hallmark commercials. And it wasn't because, and don't get me wrong, when I had PMS, it was way worse, but I was hypersensitive. So my social inabilities, as I would say, I was talking too much. I was always talking, I was constantly talking to people. I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to talk to me, and I wanted da. I was very much a people pleaser. And that led to some things that just weren't cool. But the reality is that some of that was neurodivergence. Some of that was trauma response. So yes, you can be gifted and highly intelligent. And we're not saying that you can't be one. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have both, and you can highly function, so to speak, with both and do very well. It's just that sometimes you may find that some of the symptoms may cause you more problems than, or may make things more challenging, I should say, than what would be neurotypically.
And you know what? Thinking about this,
Yes.
So it's kind of, again, going in two parts. It's playing off of both race and gender, right?
Yep.
So if I'm in a school that's mostly Black, like almost all Black,
Mm-hmm.
and the school might be by a relatively rougher neighborhood, so some of these kids, the stuff they think about, like, school ain't nothing for them because they got other stuff they worrying about when they come to school.
Right.
And they might be giving the teachers problems. If you look at me in comparison, I'm not talking too much in class because I'm not talking to anybody because I don't know how to start a conversation. I don't know how to really engage in the way that they are. The teacher might just see that as a positive. Oh,
right.
This girl, she's different from the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not causing me any problems. So this is a good. Then if I am excelling in different parts academically, again, another thing, they're like, this is a positive. Oh, this girl is different from these other kids.
She's my dream student.
She's my, literally that. She's my dream student. I couldn't ask for a better blah, 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 all this other stuff. So they're seeing all of these as positives. So for what reason would they need to, in the next parent-teacher conference, speak about different things that might be happening that they're like, you might want to look into this?
Mm-hmm. And then what I've learned from my husband and watching him over the last 20 some odd years teaching, like I said, one time he ended up with a classroom full of little boys. And I think he had maybe 5 girls. And I was like, what is up with that? And he said, because they gave him the quote unquote problem children. So the little boys that were in his class were already labeled by some of these teachers. And it turns out that they were just being regular kids, meaning, they're doing stuff little boys do. They want to wrestle and all that kind of stuff. But some of them would be like, Mr. Boston, can I stand up and do my math homework? Sure. Mr. Boston, can I do this while I, can I dance a little bit? And he'd be like, okay, if you just stay at your desk and don't do this. You have a kid that wants to tap out a beat. He's looking at him to see, are you tapping out a beat while you're doing your work? Or are you tapping out a beat because you and your boys in the back trying to create the next rap album? And then he's like, oh, he's tapping. I mean, he had those, and realized he's tapping because he's thinking while he's working. So it doesn't bother him, right? So those behaviors, and I know I'm talking about boys, but our little Black boys have not been studied either. So let's just put that out there when we're talking about race too, even though we're talking about women, but I'll get to that in a second. But he recognized that these students learned in a different way. So let them learn in a way that is going to allow them to learn. So then they were like, oh, so-and-so hasn't been to the principal's office all year. Why would I send them there? Because he was doing it. He was always standing up in class and da-da-da. Because that's the best way he learned. That was a form of neurodivergence, right? There were times when he would go, this child needs to be tested. Parents didn't want their child tested, and especially in the Black community, they didn't want to be tested because we all understand when your child gets labeled, if they're labeled a troublemaker, if they're labeled truant, if they're labeled, any kind of way, that sticks with them. So they didn't want their child labeled, but yet they didn't realize it was to the detriment of the child that they could have accommodations. They might need a little bit longer to take that math test or something like that. So these are the little boys. Now, when you're talking about little girls, the way that it shows up in girls differently from boys is, for instance, the little girl that looks zoned out in class and daydreaming, that's a coping mechanism for her as part of her neurodivergence.
You want to know
Maybe it's
something?
too.
I remember this being a thing that was sent home on progress reports. That sometimes I would just be sitting there, just kind of daydreaming, just kind of like zone, just like, I'm over here now. And I think the problem was twofold. I think on the one hand, because I was ahead academically, the work they were giving me at first was not cutting it. Like it truly was not stimulating enough for me to then be interested in doing it. And then if I did do it, I'm done faster than everybody else. So I'm back to, and then y'all told me, don't just be trying to talk to people. So I guess I'll just sit here and do something else. And now I have completely zoned out.
And now
another thing that this has reminded me of, my mother told me at some point that, okay, so a little backstory. My first grade teacher, she was awesome. Her name was Miss Douglas. Miss Douglas was amazing. One time she broke her leg. So when she broke her leg, she was out for a little while. And her TA, I believe, who was like in school like to become a teacher, she took over the class for a little bit. This TA was younger, and I think she had known some stuff. I think she had been learning some things, studying some things, because she sent a note home to my mother that said, I think Alexis might have ADHD. You might want to look into that. I don't know.
Really?
Yes. Do you know that my mama, of course, was offended?
Of course.
Because what black folk favorite thing to say, ain't nothing wrong with that child.
Ain't
nothing wrong with
my baby.
Now, you know, the stereotype at this time, because it would have been, when I was in the first grade, it was 98. We don't want to talk about it. I won't talk about what you was doing in 98 if you don't, if you don't want to. So again, we just talked about this in the previous episode. In the 90s, they was just now starting to think about what this might have to do with girls.
White girls.
So my mom probably only heard of ADHD with little quote unquote bad little white boys. That's probably what she thought about. So she was like, I know you ain't saying my child got all this. Now, in retrospect, I'm like, man, this lady was on to something. She was on to something.
And she was in tune to you.
She was like, something is different about this kid. And I've seen stuff that overlaps with this. Some of the ways that autism and ADHD overlap, I feel like I experienced more of it maybe when I was younger. And then I don't really connect with it now. Some of the symptoms that I see. So I can totally see how she was just like, oh my gosh, I think I figured it out. I found it. This kid has ADHD. And my mom was like, no, she does not. My mama kept the note for some reason. I don't know why she got this torturous letter she's keeping that she hates. Because black moms are insane. But
yes, because she was going to prove them wrong. My baby do not have no ADHD.
Fast forward. I am now 32 years old, and I'm like, hey, Ma, remember that time? Yeah.
Remember
she was close.
Time.
that teacher was close, man. She was closer than anybody else was.
Yes.
So that kind of goes back into race, because like culture, how culture plays along with race. We black and brown people don't really like being stigmatized in that sort of way. Because we've already have so many other stigmas that we're trying to fight. Don't also give my child this kind of label. It's something that we are always trying to fight against, but I definitely think in previous years it was stronger. I think now I have way more like friends with children who are just like, I think this is going on, I'm gonna go find out. And I'm like, that's a good thing that you're doing, that you're gonna go find out. And then when they go find out and they get the diagnosis, it's like, oh man, my kid has this. My poor baby. I'm like, yeah, but listen, you figured this out early. So you're going to be able to help them and to advocate for them in schools and things like that, and help them to be able to operate with a little bit more ease than some of us did.
Exactly. And, it's funny when you talk about back at school. So for me, I remembered, so I went to an all Black private school from like 2nd grade to 5th grade. Pretty important years of my life. And they at one point talked about skipping me, and my mom was like, no. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I'm going to get skipped from 2nd grade to 4th grade or whatever. And my mom's like, no, you're going to graduate with people your age. You are going to experience the things you should experience at your age when it's age appropriate, not get thrust into, being in high school and you're only, 11 or 12 years old kind of thing. And I understood that and I appreciate it now. But one of the challenges during that time was, like you, I would get bored in class and then I was talking. So they tried to have me help other people and do other things around the classroom and that sort of a thing. My report cards constantly said, from a child up, excessive talking in class. I was a talker. And I know part of it was I was bored. And my mom would always tell them, give her some more challenging work. But it didn't cross someone's mind to think, okay, she's really good in these subjects. She's not so good in these subjects. She's talking a lot in class, because if I couldn't do the work, I was going to talk. And if I could do the work, I was going to do the work and finish and still going to talk. So it just never, it wasn't things that people connected together as this plus this minus this or plus this equals this. It wasn't an equation they put together at that time. And I think that's a little bit different now. And honestly, I think there are more people now with children in school that are putting those equations together. They're getting the answer for themselves before they even go. Like, they know that their child should go and be tested. They know there's a reason why their child is not reading well, or there's a reason why their child is having some behavior issues. Probably because the child is misunderstood. There's still some bad kids out there. Don't get me wrong. There's some kids that have been raised by some very good parents and the child is still bad. And then you have other kids who have some not so good parents and they do very well behaviorally. But the point is that there are some that still have behavior challenges, socialization challenges, academic challenges and things. And some of those parents know that that's the problem, know what a problem is, know that there's more than likely, if my child gets a test, they're going to be assessed for this, and that, and they still don't want to do it because they don't want the IEP, the RTI, or whatever else following their child, because there's still the stigma, just like in mental health in general. That's not what Black and brown people do. And it's stronger in some cultures than others. And the Black culture is, you're going to pray it away. You can go to church, you're going to pray it away. I'm not sure how it works in Hispanic and Latina cultures. I'm assuming that even there, especially if they're Catholic, you going to go to the priest and get some Hail Marys and so on and so forth. In the Asian community, that's just not allowed, period. In many of the Asian communities, it's like, no, that doesn't even exist. I'm going to need you to go on and go back to school and turn that A- into an A+ and call it a day. That is still, each culture has their own
way that they have become accustomed to as a group of dealing with it. Exactly. And I'm sure there are some other nuances that, like, we only know some parts from, like, friends that we have, and of course there's always media representation and how that comes across. Exactly. So we're sure there's some nuances to it that we're totally missing. But in general, what we do know is Black and brown communities, we don't necessarily have a track record of dealing with this kind of thing. We and simply won't deal with it. That's what we
do. And part of it too is because, like you said, historically we've had to deal with so much other people labeling us, labels that don't fit us or that are inappropriate, being called lazy and all these other different types of things when you're out there working harder than everybody else under the sun. And the one reason why too that this is also important is because this also translates. So as we grow up and we turn into women with careers long before you get married and have children, or have children and get married, or whatever you choose to do in life, the reality is that when we have a career, I feel, at least in my experience and what I've seen with some of my friends, some of these things really come to light. So like for me, the disorganization, it was bad for me at work. I literally had to go through a training program on how to manage information electronically and physically. They spent a lot of money putting me through that program. And it was honestly the best thing ever that I learned. Not that it took away my challenges, but it at least gave me some form of systems I still rely on to this day that help me. It will show up in how we communicate. It shows up in how we socialize. It shows up in how we do collaboration and brainstorming. I was known for talking over people. I was known for shouting out like ideas as they came to me. I did not realize that's not how other people communicated. I did not realize it was offensive. And then there were times when I was mistaken as the angry Black woman because I sat there quietly and didn't smile every day. Well, I'm walking around in pain because I have endometriosis. I don't feel like smiling today. I am dealing with depression right now. I'm doing good to show up to work on top of everything else. What was your experience like?
Yeah. So I think a good way to explain my experience in work is that there has been more than one time where I find out from the office gossip that I have been referred to as standoffish at work. Now, here's the thing about that. I don't care because I don't go to work to make friends.
Okay.
I'm like that person on reality TV who's like, I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to win. I just came here for the check. So I'm not at work to make friends. I'm not coming here to make connections in that way. Now, what that does do is reduce some of the social capital that you have in the workplace.
Yes.
But because I'm not interested in doing that from like a personality level, and then on top of that, I simply, like, my brain can't compute why I need to do that here.
Mm-hmm.
I was hired to do a job on a job description and to do very well at that. I don't need to go find people in the corner to chat with. And what we going to talk about? I have to come up with enough scripts for conversations. I'm not coming up with extra ones to talk to people who I actually don't want to be my friend. I'm trying to keep the friendships I got. I ain't trying to build new fake ones, right? So I'm not doing that. But I have been told that people consider me to be standoffish. But it also depends on who's saying it. Some people have been like, oh, she kind of keeps to herself, but she's really sweet though. And these might be people who have maybe had like smaller one-on-one interactions with me. I'm not really doing something in the group. I'm not walking in feeling like I need to draw attention to myself, speaking to everybody like that. But if they came to ask me about something work related, I might be like, oh yeah, I'll help you with that. And then they can be like, oh, this is the kind of person that she is. She simply doesn't feel the need to say it to everybody, right? The problem with that is, though, when you go back to looking like the angry Black lady, you can get kind of that sort of stigma attached to you as well, because if you standoffish, you don't want to talk to nobody, you don't want to, I'm like, I'm just kind of here, y'all. I didn't know I had to go over there and hang out with y'all. And actually I don't have to, and I won't be doing it.
You know what's wild to me? I'm going to take a little bit of a squirrel detour here.
Okay.
Is that, no, I mean, in seriousness, is that we already deal with that. I've seen some of it in the Latina Hispanic community. I don't know how prevalent it is, but as Black women, I have definitely seen other Black women be like, oh, she just don't want to talk, and she thinks she this and she thinks she that. And then you think you have that, you're dealing with that on top of the fact of being neurodivergent, where they now 2 times it, right? And then when you do try to be somewhat sociable, then it's like, oh, so now you want to talk. So now and you're like, okay, so do I or don't I? I need y'all to, so I just had to say it's a lot of this, when we really think about it, is a double-edged sword. Whether we're talking about maybe triple-edged, because it's double-edged when it comes to those within our community. And then you have to add in the rest of society, the unmelanated society that is also going to present to us their viewpoints from their perspectives. Because if I get asked one more time, now I generally almost always smile. I'm going to smile when I say hi to you, good morning, that sort of a thing. That's just me and my personality. And it's part of what I feel like is my signature brand. But the moment that I come in and I'm not smiling, everybody automatically assumes something is wrong. Doesn't mean something is wrong. Maybe I was thinking about something. Maybe something just happened where I'm like, oh, I got to think about da-da-da. Oh man, I forgot this. Like we were talking about the other day, you forget your phone at home. You forgot this. And you're just like, okay, now I got to figure out how I'm going to get through my day without the things that help me get through my day. There's times where I stopped in my tracks and was like, I did not take my medicine this morning. Okay, so That means I have to figure out how I'm going to socially interact and engage with others, manage, or as they say, regulate my emotions, control the thoughts in my head that now do not have a filter. They have my spiritual filter, but I need an additional filter. It's just those types of things. Like, for real, it's like, okay, there's so much more I have to think about so it's not that there was a problem. I might be just thinking about how I'm going to get through the next few minutes. Or I now have to, maybe I found myself doing something repetitive, and now I'm wondering, okay, does that mean that my medicine's no longer working? Does that mean I've developed a new symptom? Does that mean I've kicked, I'm thinking about me. It wasn't even about you, boo.
Yeah, most of the time I walk into work, I'm trying to remember which direction I'm supposed to walk off the elevator. I still don't know. We've gone back to the office and I'm still like, okay, which, nope, that way. Like, I'm so busy trying to not look more awkward than usual, just trying to get to my desk. I ain't got time for y'all. I don't know.
I love how you said that.
I'm trying
not to look more awkward than usual. Yes.
Yeah, because the awkwardness is going to happen either way. I've accepted that so many years ago. Thank you, Issa Rae, for Awkward Black Girl. So I already know that. But I do think, all that kind of depends on the work environment you're in. I don't think I'm having that same type of issue where I am now. I actually, as much as I complain about having to go to the office now, again, where I work now, I feel really supported in a lot of different ways.
Good.
And it's a really good work environment for a lot of different reasons. But I was thinking about so we're talking about all these different stigmas and challenges and cultural kind of expectations and things that we're just used to. They might prevent you from getting the diagnosis you need. And then because you don't have the diagnosis you need, they help you to understand yourself and learn how to accommodate yourself and advocate for yourself in situations. You're like less equipped to fight against the stigma that's been thrown upon you.
Yes. Very much agree. And that's why I said, as we get older and we start working, as we start moving from those high school relationships and even college relationships, which may or may not stay with us for the rest of our lives. And now you're looking at cultivating new friendships, new relationships. And like you said, even in the networking, because it never crossed my mind, the not having enough social capital, that when you're trying to move, a network, that can help you with those things. And so you're still out there on your own doing them. And that reminds me, I want to ask you a question about an experience that anyway, I'll come back to it. But
okay.
I know I totally just squirreled right there for a minute. So my apologies. But what I was going to say is that, so as we move into the adult world, and now we have all these other things that are adding complications to our life, so to speak. These building relationships, the adulting, I've got to pay bills, I got to get a car, I got to do all. That's when neurodivergence is probably really going to make it even more of an appearance. If it was relatively subtle growing up, or where it was, you were able to mask it more growing up, and you masked it because just like in trauma, you have coping skills. Masking is our coping skills in the neurodivergence, which is another reason why those things overlap, and it makes it harder to get a diagnosis. Because are you masking as a form of coping? Are you coping because you don't know what else to do? Like, you're trying to figure things out. Masking is in effect camouflaging and hiding things. Coping skills is you're using other things to help, for lack of a better term, to soothe some of the discomfort that you're having. Masking is, I'm going to pretend like I know what's going on when I don't know what's going on. Coping is, I'm finna drink this whole liter of water because I don't feel right, and this is going to make me feel better. I'm using water as an example because I don't want to use other things. And so we do that even more. That's why the neurodivergence really comes to light when I think back to my young adult years, my 20s, work, social relationships, trying to make my way into the world. I didn't make a lot of bad decisions, but there were some that were not so good. I realized why I always kept a small circle of friends. For the most part, when I used to try to have a nice larger circle of friends, a lot of things come to you and how you interact. I did not understand why it was so easy, and still is, for many of my friends to have a budget, to live off a budget and be perfectly fine. And I struggled. My mom, it wasn't that my mom didn't talk. My mom taught me as a kid how to sit down and write checks and pay bills. She wanted me to understand what that means, why you don't come ask to go nowhere and do nothing around the first of the month, because all the bills got to be paid. But come the 15th, we're going to ball out like we ain't got nothing else to do because everything was paid. So you're going to sit down and you're going to write I knew my mother's driver's license number as a child. R06-92206. Still remember it to this day, because they used to have to write it on the checks. And my mom said, and Lord have mercy, when they came out with ATMs, you just thought, oh, well, that gives off money. Well, then I just put my card in and it gives off money. Well, mama, put your card in and get us some more money. When she said, we don't have no money right now, so no, you can't go to Chuck E. Cheese with your friends. Well, mama, put your card in the machine and get some money. That's how my brain worked. A lot of things that we experience as children might manifest itself when we're older, which also makes this harder to get diagnosed, because now we don't know if it's just because we're trying to adult, if we're trying to build new relationships, I moved to a new city, whatever the case may be. But a question I've been wanting to ask you for the longest in your whole career experience, because again, this goes back to challenges about being diagnosed, and also to the misperceptions and things that we have in the workplace. How do you handle or get through job interviews?
I can get the job interview because my resume looks good. I can write pretty well, so I can describe my experiences just fine. I went to a pretty decent school, so that alone will get me in the door. They're like, what, you have a degree in economics from such and such? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I want to talk to you. I hate interviewing. It is the most annoying exercise in fake social interaction. I hate it so much. And you have to be really on when you go to a job interview. You're trying to explain your experiences, but you're also trying to showcase your personality. Why am I putting on a show? You won't hire me or no? Then there's communication challenges with me being like, I take questions kind of literally sometimes. And like, I even take the reason why I'm here kind of literally. And what I mean is, people will say it's not lying, but you got to lie a little bit in the interview. So what interested you in this role? The actual answer is, I need a job.
Yep.
You are hiring. That's what interested me in this role. It was those two things. But what I have to do is come up with some weird speech about what the role entailed in the job description that I found particularly interesting and how it related to. I don't care nothing about this company. Y'all don't do anything that I find morally reprehensible. You're not too far away for the commute that I'm willing to do, and you're willing to pay me an amount of money that I want. That is why I have applied to you. I think everybody kind of has those thoughts, right?
Yes.
But it is like, it makes me itch trying to answer these questions. Because like lying is hard for me. Like I can't do it. Like I don't do it right. So I have to, in my feelings, in my body, I'm lying for 30 minutes. It's exhausting. And then you can't do the same thing in every interview. You have your certain answers, but you got to tweak it to go right to the role, right to the company. Oh, I hate it. It makes me feel ill. My stomach hurts. I feel nauseous before I go in there. I have had crying fits because it is just like, I have to go do this again. So I usually am like, if a company makes me want to quit, you done messed up, because I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to have to go through all this to go work somewhere else. So you were supposed to really make me upset if I'm like, I got to go find another job.
I was wondering about that too, because again, this shows you how it can show up in our adulthood and the impacts if we're not diagnosed. So if you're not diagnosed and you're experiencing to that degree what Alexis just described, that's the other reason why we encourage going and talking to someone, because this does impact us. And yes, we're talking about the challenges of being diagnosed. And so that was something I've been wanting to ask you for a minute, because I thought, that has got to be like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty
Yeah.
bad. Though I thought about this recently as I was standing in the elevator at work. You know how standing in the elevator is just awkward anyway? It's just a bunch of people
Yes.
just like standing there trying. Okay, imagine every room you go into feeling like the elevator.
Ooh.
So that's kind of how I go about life. I'm always in an elevator.
Wow.
If I know you, it's better. But when I first get into the room, depending on how I'm doing that day, it's a little elevator. And then we might step off. But every new room, every new experience I go into, I am on an elevator, and I would very much like to get out this elevator.
That is a very powerful explanation, and one I can visually and from a sensory perspective understand. It also makes me understand something else that I saw. So I don't know how many out there have seen the K-drama show Extraordinary Attorney Woo, who is a Korean attorney who is autistic. She's on the autistic spectrum. I looked up a lot of things because I get very concerned about how anyone is portrayed in the media. So especially those in the accessible community, because there have been years of those that have been in wheelchairs, blind, deaf, so on and so forth in the accessible community, portrayed in the worst kinds of ways and portrayed specifically a certain kind of way. And we know that in the Black and Brown community, that has been the case with all of us and still continues to this day. So when I watched that show, one of the reasons why I love it is because they did a lot of research. The actress who played the role did a ton of research to make sure that her portrayal would actually portray someone who was on the autism spectrum and would be capable of having a job as a lawyer, as many of them are. She just had to figure out how to work through some of the things that bother her about social interactions. One of them was walking into a new room. So before she walks into a new room, she stops and she counts. And she explained in the show, like, because, the ableists are on there. Like, why do you do that? Why can't you just do it faster? She goes, well, I will try to count faster. But the reason why I take my time to count is because it allows me, basically her brain, the opportunity to recognize I am getting ready to walk into a new environment. Even if it's a room she's been in tons of times, I am getting ready to go through a door that is going to shift my senses, shift the way that I have to think and interact, and I have to prepare myself. Now, she didn't say all of that, but that's basically what it came down to. So when you describe being on the elevator, I think all of us can relate to what it's like being on an elevator with a bunch of people we don't know. It's awkward, especially as it gets fuller. You get pressed in, you start feeling claustrophobic. You were like, I don't want to have conversations. Okay, I'm going to stare at the buttons. I can't just keep staring at the buttons. Why is this music playing? Why are you looking at me? What? All these thoughts that, I felt that so deep in my soul. And then when the doors open and you can stuff off and go into your own world, you're like, or go into a place where you feel safe. I will remember that when it comes to, especially I try to be careful about inviting you to different places, just because not places, but when I have you over and there's gatherings, I want to make sure there's people you know and feel relatively comfortable with. And I felt that way long before I even knew that you were neurodivergent. I just got the sense of, this is before I really knew you. I was like, okay, she's kind of quiet. She's kind of an introvert. Let me make sure she's around people she's comfortable with, so she'll talk. She'll feel like I can talk and I can feel comfortable. So I've always been kind of aware of that. I'm going to be even more aware of it now and give you a heads up if I'm going to be inviting you over or doing something where there's going to be more people. And thank you for coming to my business launch party, because I know that had to have been an experience too. Like, I'm thinking back on different things now.
But you know what, though? There's like a weird little thing too, because so I used to think I had social anxiety. And then I remember when I was in therapy, I asked Dr. A, I said, so what's the difference between what you're talking about with autism and social anxiety? And I wish for the life of me I could remember exactly what she said. But she did explain the difference to me. And with the social anxiety, it's more like just the fear at all of being in there with these people. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about it. And I'm more like, I could take it or leave it with some of this, but I just don't know how to start a conversation with people. I have to and if I'm with newer people, I can't just run through my regular scripts. I gotta make a new one.
Yeah.
So going to an event like your launch party, it wasn't like terribly big, right? The lighting was kind of ambient because it was in like for the location that it was in, it was fine, and it wasn't overly loud or anything like that. So I was like, it's fine. I could find a place to sit so I can observe and then see if I do want to have a conversation, how to do so. If it was nothing but strangers in there, nobody I knew, then I would have been more uncomfortable. But I just would have kind of just probably got quiet, just like, because I'm like, ugh, do I have a thing I want to think of to say? I don't know. Should I be talking to people here? Is this a thing what should I be talking about? It's not that much about me being like, I'm nervous about what is people going to think of me. I don't really care about that. What am I supposed to do? Just what am I supposed to do when I'm in here? I don't really know what to do from situation to situation. If it's a new situation, it's like I'm starting all over again, but trying to build up my arsenal of understanding.
And then watching other people to see how they're interacting and what are they doing. Do I follow their lead? I get it. I totally get that. The other thing too that I wanted to just talk about is we've touched on it, but when it comes to, there's so much intersectionality about gender bias, course racism, ageism, all of that overlaps, which also plays a role, particularly medically, with us getting diagnosed. As soon as we walk in the door, we're already being summed up. Just we technically are used to that when we walk into a store. We know somebody's already looking us up and down, and they are trying to make an assumption about whether we're one of the good ones or not, whether the locked case needs to stay locked, all these different types of things. And it's no different in the medical community, unfortunately. You go to an ER, you'll find out real quick if you tell them that you're having some pain, and how quickly they're going to look at you and try to assess whether or not you're drug seeking.
Yeah. I had an experience at an urgent care one time when I had some issues with my wrist. I woke up that morning, I thought I must have broke it. I really did. It hurt so bad. And for some crazy reason, I drove myself to the urgent care. That was a wild decision. I'm right-handed. I don't need to be doing that. Anyway, and there was something about my interaction with that provider that I felt like she didn't believe me when I said it hurt that bad. And I think that she thought I was there trying to get a script for some medication. It was a very uncomfortable experience and kind of disturbing, especially considering how bad I was. I mean, I'm in tears, right? But I don't feel this kind of thing all the time. So when I do get a feeling like that, I'm like, I think this doesn't feel right because it's not right. And I don't like this. So it really does happen.
It does. I remember when I was dealing with my thyroid issues, I became stabilized. And then after so long, you're allowed to get off of the medication for the most part if your numbers stay the same. But I knew something was wrong because I started having some symptoms again. So I went to my primary care, and his assistant was the one that saw me. And I said, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. This is a SNIS. The last time that I had issues with my thyroid, these were the symptoms that I had. So I feel like there's an issue with my thyroid again. Instead of ordering a blood test, she was like, well, just take some more vitamin B12 and get some vitamin D and, see how and I'm going, I've already dealt with this for X number of years. And I'm coming back telling you and the last time I dealt with this, which was my first time, I literally almost died. So I am telling you something. So I left and promptly went and saw a rheumatologist who did do the blood work and said, yes, there is an issue with your thyroid. And here's some medicine that you need to take because now instead of being overactive, it's underactive. So now we got to get it back to your baseline. We share these experiences not to be scary and to say that the medical system is bad because it is not. We need it. It is there for a reason. But we also share this because you also have to be an advocate for your health. And I've learned over the years as I've had to deal with different health situations, advocate for yourself. Don't just read WebMD and think that, I've got answers. No, you read and do research from a variety of sources, preferably the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic. They will not steer you wrong, or Johns Hopkins. They all have histories with us that is not favorable, but yet they are the leading researchers and academics when it comes to medical situations. So what I'm saying is, do your research. I had done enough research to know that when I go in, I'm going to ask the question as if I do not have this knowledge, and I'm going to wait to see what you say to see if it aligns with the knowledge I have. If it does not, I'm going to either ask more questions or I'm going to go seek out a specialist. And you have to advocate for yourself. And it's the same in your mental health. I will be honest with you. I have been to therapists that did not make me feel very good. Like something was off in my interaction. I remember very keenly that I was in a depressive episode. I had a emotional breakdown overnight that when I went to work, I was still crying and could not pull myself together. And I found a therapist that was willing to see me. She was a psychiatrist, and I went to her office. And first of all, the room felt like it was gargantuan. She sat in her desk across the room, big wooden, probably mahogany desk, feet up on the desk a little bit, relaxed or whatever, didn't bother me, had me tell my entire story of what sent me over the edge, triggered me, and why. I am distraught. I am devastated. I was not in a good place. And this woman, who did not say one consoling word, did not barely acknowledge my presence or anything else, looked at me and said, "You don't need medication, so you don't need to see me. You need to find someone else." And that was
nothing else to say.
Nope. And literally, and I'm just sitting there looking at her like, she didn't give me recommendations. She didn't make sure that I was okay, that it was safe for me to leave.
Yep, that's what I was thinking about. Are you
none
a
of that
to yourself at this moment?
Exactly.
Are you okay to be released?
And I left and I got in my car and I bawled my eyes out because I was, again, a people pleaser. I was emotionally hurt. You didn't think I was good enough to talk to you, which was not the case. Yeah, the rejection sensitivity was like high. Like, you didn't think I was good enough to talk to you. You didn't think my problem was that big. You didn't see how distraught I am. And then I was hurt that you didn't even validate me in any shape, form, or fashion. I bawled my eyes out and still had an hour drive to get back home. Bawled my eyes out. And I did not go back to a therapist for umpteen years. And I desperately needed one. I'm telling you through experience, I have had to work and fight to advocate for myself. And I do the same thing for my family and my friends. That's why I'm the one that people can call in a crisis, because I'm going to show up. I'm going to put aside all my feelings and emotions about the fact that you are sitting here in this situation, because I need to make sure you're taken care of. And I'm going to fight for you. And just like you said, you can knuck your butt. I'm just saying. I'm going to fight for you. And then I will have the breakdown I deserve when it's all said and done. I will crash out. But in the meantime, so I'm encouraging you as women. In some cultures, it is not considered polite to speak up. It is considered disrespectful to your senior, your elder, your so forth in a lot of cultures. And I get that. And so I am speaking as a Black American woman, but I'm also speaking to you as your sister friend, your sister squirrel. Please advocate for yourself. People have, without saying it, been accused of being a pill seeker. I've been told that my pain wasn't as bad as it really was. I have been told things were all in my head. I have been told that you've been here umpteen times about this same thing. I had an employer say, "You still sick?" Yeah, that's the story for another day. I'm not going to go into that. But all I looked at him, I said, "Sir, you do realize I was sick when I came to fly to see you. And I had to fly to see you while I was on my way home from the trip I was sent on that I got sick on." That's a whole nother story, whole other story. But so we're going to be told a lot of things. The one thing you can do is tell yourself you deserve more, you are worth more, and you deserve and have the right to advocate for yourself. I am off my soapbox now.
Yeah, and you know that speaking up for yourself in certain situations is gonna probably look different from person to person,
yes,
from culture to culture, personality to personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just being aware that these are some barriers that you are facing can help you to prepare for it.
Yes.
If you know that there's nothing you can do about the fact that there's a race, gender, and age bias working against you, you can at least go into the space knowing that's a thing so you're not blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that's a thing so that you maybe, we have to cope and we have to survive in different ways. So you know what kind of words you can use that will be able to get you what you need to help yourself out.
Exactly. And I do want to touch on one thing that is a stereotype common in one of our communities that's not so common in the others. And I think it's important to touch on. And that's being the model minority. And that is really big in our Asian community. Still is to this day, whether you're living in America or not. And the one thing that I would like to say in regards to that is that oftentimes you all are masking what you're dealing with because you're supposed to be, or perceived as supposed to be, high achieving. That might be something that is still within your family dynamic. It's not in everyone's family dynamic. To be successful in whatever ways is defined as successful. And again, that's not in every family dynamic. And also to how we are perceived by our non-melanated brothers and sisters, especially in America. Our Asian family members are considered the ones who are model. They're going to come to work. They're going to be quiet. They're going to this and they're going to that. I'm happy to say that that is not the case with most that I have experience with. They're going to speak up and that sort of a thing. But there's certain stereotypes that each one of us all have to deal with. And that's one of them. And there's also cultural implications because under every stereotype, there's a layer of truth. So let's just be real about that. That's a whole nother conversation. But
be careful, friend. That's all I got to say. Be careful.
No. What I mean by that is, there, like in the Black community, there's a stereotype about how, Black people don't get in the water. Black people don't swim. Well, that's a stereotype, but there's also a layer of truth to that in the sense that we were not allowed to go to public pools. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have pools in our own backyards per se, most of us, to learn how to swim, and if you went to public beaches and things, they had to be Black only beaches. Or you went to Black only pools, which weren't always clean and safe, because if you stepped foot in any other pool, they were going to drain it, scrub it, clean it, and everything. So no, many of us did not grow up learning how to swim because culturally there were things. Many of us didn't grow up wearing sunscreen. Why? Because we were told Black folks didn't need to wear sunscreen. Well, that's not true. I know Black folks that had skin cancer. So I put on sunscreen even when people look at me cray. And there are some brands that are absolutely fabulous. I will mention their names later when we get a little bit bigger for sponsorship. But
but no, I see where you're going with this now, because in a similar way, a lot of our Asian friends have gotten that stereotype as model minority, well, because they had to figure out that that's how they had to behave to survive, because they were literally being killed and thrown in camps. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's been passed down culturally, especially here in the States. But then you look over in other countries that do not treat minorities very well, and especially Asian ones, they treat them a certain way. So that's what I mean by there are certain stereotypes that do have an underlying layer of truth. It is culturally impressed upon many of our Asian brothers and sisters to achieve well in school. Part of that is because their countries had to fight to get to where they are to this day, to be viable. And part of that was education. Part of that was knowing how to interact with the rest of the world and things like that. So it's not belittling anything. That's not playing into stereotypes. My point is, we're all dealing with certain things. Like we talk about the angry Black woman. We're all dealing with certain things that are attributed to us and thrown upon us that may or may not be true. And that can also limit our abilities to speak up for ourselves and how we speak up and show up for ourselves. So find the way that is comfortable for you, like Alexis mentioned. Find your support systems. Even if it's hard for you to talk to people, if it's hard for you to engage, you can still find support systems. You can find those that are willing to take the time to sit and talk to you and learn about you and understand you. So they may be the ones that might be able to help you advocate for yourself. Because sometimes we can't advocate for ourselves. So we need that strong friend, that ally that can do that for us. So we're going to close out a really heavy discussion with, we still need allies. So if you are looking to be an ally and you're listening, that's a good place to start. So get to know us as individuals, get to understand the neurodivergent community, and also get to understanding more deeply some of the challenges that we've all faced and have overcome as women of color. And now we've got an extra layer because we've had literal medical diagnoses that was not applied to us and not meant to be applied to us, because we're living in a world that was not built for us, period. So let's just put that out there in every way. So if you're looking to be an ally, this is a great place to start. Keep listening to us, listen to our stories. We don't need you to validate us. It's helpful if you do, but we don't need that. We're not asking for that. But we are asking for you to at least try to understand. And for those of us that are women of color that are dealing with all of these different aspects of our pure existence, no, you do not have to justify your existence. You do not have to explain and justify who you are, how you came into this world, and how your beautiful mind works. Keep being you and keep fighting for you.
Okay. Shido jumped on her Maya Angelou. I thought she was gonna end up on top of a literal soapbox and throw her fist in the air. I wasn't sure. I was just sitting here watching to see what happens. But
I feel very passionate about that. I'm sorry.
I could tell. You saw I just sat here and watched. But in all honesty, we know people are listening. Most likely, most people listening, again, preaching to the choir, they're probably already in the community. But if you're someone who is trying to see how you can better understand and support someone else, agreed. Some listening, some understanding, and reaching out to let that person, that special person in your life who you do see is experiencing this life that we're living, just being there for them is probably going to be huge for them to be successful in just having a good, happy, active life.
I agree. As always, there'll be some resources in the show notes for all of us that might need those resources. And until we're able to get together and squirrel again, please take care of yourselves and keep fighting for yourself.
Bye.
We want to thank you, our fellow sister squirrels, for joining us today. If you found this episode helpful, please take a moment and share your thoughts with us and your fellow squirrels by taking a screenshot of the episode, then tagging BGBG Squirrel in your IG stories.